everybody, I'm Wayne Davies from Spectrum Economics, and today I'd like to talk to you about marginal utility. So I've made several videos and written several posts about utility, and I also wrote a post a few months ago about marginal utility. So this video here is a follow-up on the written post where I discuss marginal utility. I always find it good to follow up my written posts with a video. Sometimes they can be a little bit late, as you've seen in a lot of cases. I get very busy, but in this case I'm following up fairly recently. So some of the graphs are going to be a little bit similar to the ones I have in the post, but it's always good for you to go back and have a little look at the post as well, because things will be explained just a little bit differently on paper as they do in words. But if you're someone who likes to hear me talk about something and explain the diagrams, explain the concepts in person, then I guess the video would be great for you as well. Okay, so a few things have changed up a little bit. As you can see here, this picture here, I had Rikishi and now I've got Baby Groot. But it's a similar thing though, and it shows you diminishing marginal utility. Maybe I should define for you what utility is first. Sorry, I'll define for you what marginal utility is. So utility in itself is the level of satisfaction that you obtain from something. Marginal utility is the extra level of satisfaction you obtain from consuming an extra unit of something. As you can see here, we've got Baby Groot and he's got pizzas. So the first pizza, he's very hungry, so yummy yummy, he likes it. Next pizza is still good, and he still likes it. Next one is not bad, it's nice. Next one is okay, but now he's getting very, very full. And the fifth pizza, he doesn't want it, and then basically the sixth pizza he's probably going to throw up. So that's the general idea behind diminishing marginal utility. And I'm going to elaborate that a little bit more as I go through this video. So we can look at utility, or marginal utility should I say, in terms of one good or in terms of several goods. So I'll start off with one good. As you can see here, we've got this graph where you've got on the y-axis utility and you've got on the x-axis quantity. So from this graph, as you can see, it's the quantity of this particular good. What good should we call this? I haven't named it actually. Should we call it good X? So as the quantity of good X increases, the level of utility is also increasing but at a decreasing rate. And eventually you can see it's almost flatlining, and that's what we talk about with food. You eat so much food, people could pay you money to eat more and you still probably wouldn't eat it. You're actually getting what we call negative marginal utility from each additional piece of food that you eat. It's not the same with a lot of other things, but in most cases, unless you've got some form of addiction, should we say, that the more you have of something, the less utility each additional unit gives you. As you can see here in this graph, when we make a comparison of A and B. So A is a fixed increase in a particular quantity, and we've got B, which shows quite a jump in utility, and then after this good has been consumed for a little while, we have the same jump in quantity of A, but we only have an increase in utility of C that is significantly less, and that's how we can display that in terms of showing in terms of regards to one good. We can also look at it in terms of multiple goods, and what I'm going to be talking about a little bit here in this video is marginal utility in respect to several goods, and in particular I'm going to be focusing on complementary goods and substitute goods. So as you can see here, we've got the green line here, which is complements, and the red line is substitutes, and we've got utility A. So what happens is, so you've got a certain level of utility you get from what we call, let's say, a substitute. So what are substitute goods? It's probably a good place to start, right? So let's take burgers and hot dogs. For a lot of people, burgers and hot dogs fulfill a very similar sort of need. You eat them and you feel less hungry, right? And so if you eat one burger, then you eat another burger, then another burger, another burger, as I mentioned with Groot, we did with pizzas, you are going to desire more burgers less. What is if you have one burger and then you eat a hot dog or even another hot dog, then you come back to burgers again. So the utility you get from that second burger is going to be significantly less than it would have been if you'd eaten it directly after the first burger, simply because the hot dogs have fulfilled that hunger need that you have. So you can see here, you've got this downward sloping graph, so that's how your utility falls when you consume a substitute, because the substitute is fulfilling the need. It may not be a perfect substitute, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but more or less it is filling that need. Complements, on the other hand, well, that's almost the opposite effect. So let's keep in the context of food, and we talk about burgers. So for example, you have a burger and then you add a sauce to it. Utility of that burger increases. The same if you have your second burger, you're still fairly hungry. Again, you add that sauce, and therefore The diminishing effect on your burger, the utility getting from them, it doesn't diminish by as much because you've got the complementary product that is actually raising it up. And for example, you could put other things in there as well. We talk about food like sauces and stuff and things like that are not particularly filling, so that's more for flavour. So you add the flavour stuff. It could be a different sauce, for example. You have barbecue on the first one, maybe you want to have spicy jalapeno on the second one. So you change up the sauces. And of course you still get diminishing marginal utility, but not at the same rate. After all, you're still going to end up full, but you may get more satisfaction from that second burger because of the differences in flavours and stuff that you're getting from the complementary sauces to that. Alright, we can now look at it in terms of two goods or multiple goods. So you can see in the diagram here we have two goods. We've got good A and we've got good B, and we've got what we call an indifference curve. And I've explained indifference curve in a few other videos of mine as well as, but for the sake of this video I'll very briefly explain what it is. So indifference curve shows all your combinations of goods that yield the same level of utility to you. So for example, you've got good A and good B, so you could have 6 of good A and 2 of good B, or you could have 2 of good A and 6 of good B. And even though there's different numbers there, they may give you the same level of utility. So how does this work in terms of diminishing marginal utility? So as you can see here, if you have a lot of good A, you would be willing to give up quite a large sum of good A just to acquire just a few additional units of good B. You don't have much of good B, and that fulfills a different need than good A, assuming of course that they're not substitutes. And as you give away more and more of good A to acquire good B, you become less willing to give as much. Simply because now good A is becoming more scarce to you, and you still need good A for something or other, I don't know what it is. And then good B, you don't need it as much. So you've got diminishing marginal utility in respect to these two goods. And now I want to give you an example of furniture. And why I like this example is the fact that furniture, seating furniture for example, can be both complements and substitutes. So in a sense that they're complements, in the sense you go there, you get a sofa set. You get a 3-piece sofa and let's say 2 armchairs. Okay, so what happens here? So you get the sofa and you want the armchairs as well because they look good in the living room. Some people think, oh, I just got a sofa, it doesn't look great, so I get the armchairs. But at the same time though, because you have limited space and you have limited needs in terms of seating, they can also become substitutes as well. So what happens is you buy a sofa and you might be happy to buy two armchairs, for example. Or maybe you could buy another sofa. What happens if, let's say, you buy 2 armchairs? So now you've got 2 armchairs and a sofa, and you've run out of space. So now the utility you'd get from that second sofa is greatly diminished because you have nowhere to put it. Assuming that's the size of your house. Of course, you have a huge house, lots of rooms and stuff, that's not an issue. But eventually, even if you have a big house, you're going to run out of room to put sofas. And in the sense that armchairs and sofas are providing you with the seating need, and they are somewhat competing with each other, even though they can be complements as well. It's interesting, isn't it? But that's economics for you. Alright, so I'm just going to show you here some indifference curves in regards to perfect substitutes. So what are perfect substitutes? It is two goods that are basically identical. You know, it could be 2 burger patties, for example, from different companies, but more or less the same. Which happens sometimes, right? So what happens is with perfect substitutes, you can see here from a straight line, you can have all of burger A or all of burger B, and it makes no difference to you. So, or you can have 2 of burger A and 3 of burger B, and the same, it doesn't make any difference to you. And every single unit of burger B you get takes away as much utility as if you just have burger A, in the sense that they are the same. And you can see that with these straight lines here. So you see good A and good B, assuming that, let's say the top one is 5, and you've got 4 and 3 and 2 and 1 as well. There's also, you see these lines of conversion. I'll explain that in a minute as well, what I mean by that. Okay, so what about complements? I briefly mentioned about sofa sets being complements, so let's talk about something that's a more clear-cut complement. And that is, let's say, devices that require batteries and batteries. So for example, you have 2 devices. Each device requires 2 AA batteries. So therefore you have a need and a desire to acquire 4 AA batteries, am I right? And once you've got those 4 AA batteries, the utility from the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever batteries will be considerably lower. But what if you have more devices? What if you have 5 or 6 devices? Now all of a sudden, what happens now? You're going to need more batteries. So once you've attended to device 1, device 2 and device 3, then you've got device 5, 6 and 7, whatever. So the diminishing marginal utility you have for acquiring batteries doesn't kick in as much. Of course you'll tend to the devices that you like the most and the devices you like the least. So there would still be some level of diminishing marginal utility. But because these devices need batteries and don't operate without them, then your diminishing marginal utility for batteries diminishes at a much lower rate, simply because they are considered close complements. Okay, so let's now take a look at complements in terms of the indifference curves. So I showed you substitute sets now, so we can do the same here with complements. As you can see, the indifference curves look very, very different. We've got these L shapes here. So let's go back to what I talked about with our devices. So you have devices that need batteries. So you have one device and you have 2 AA batteries. Perfect. What happens if you get a second, a third, a fourth device and you can't get any batteries? Imagine they just don't exist anymore. Basically, you're stuck at the same level of utility. As you can see here, let's assume good A is your device. So you get more and more devices, but you can't get the batteries to operate them. So they're kind of almost like a perfect complement in this regard. It doesn't quite work the same with batteries. Obviously, batteries have a lot of different uses. But in terms of these particular devices, if you don't have the batteries, then you're stuck on the same level of utility. That's why we get that L shape. Okay, I mentioned earlier about the lines. I said converging, so I mean diverging, as you can see here. So this again shows you diminishing marginal utility. So what happens is you can see that these curves are moving further and further out. So in order for you to go from, let's say, IC3, indifference curve 3, to indifference curve 4, which is going from 3x to 4x, you need a fairly significant increase in your good A and your good B in order to get there. That's because, let's say with devices, for example, you may like Walkmans. You got one Walkman, great. You get your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth Walkman. In the end, you kind of get a little bit sick with them. I know it's a little bit old school when I'm talking about Walkmans, but you get the general idea, and that could be with other devices as well. Like, let's say you got gaming devices. You may have like a, I don't know, a Wii, for example. Is it a Wii or a Woo or whatever they're called? A PSP or a PS Vita and stuff like that. So as more and more gaming devices you get, the less utility each game device is going to get you, because there's certain similarities with the other devices. So that is why we're getting this effect here where the indifference curves are diverging. So an effect that you need to actually acquire more of a particular good to get you onto that indifference curve that is giving you X. I think it's jumping X, 2X, 3X, 4X. So yeah, so that's why we get that pattern with the indifference curves and why they're splitting further and further apart. Again, it's diminishing marginal utility. Alright, this brings me more or less to the end of my video. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. Again, like I recommend to you before, you go back and read the written post as well for a little bit more information. But for me to wrap up here, just a quick summary of what I mean by marginal utility. As I mentioned before, marginal utility is the additional utility you obtain from acquiring an extra good or service. Diminishing marginal utility is basically saying as you acquire more and more of something, the less utility that it gives you. And that applies fairly much across the board. My favourite example is still probably going to be food. And you know, a lot of us love food. I love my food. People love their food. But as you eat more and more, I'm afraid you're just going to end up getting sick. And that's what we got, is our diminishing marginal utility. In this case with food, it's often negative if you go too far. Alright, thank you for watching, and remember to give me a like if you're watching this, I think, on YouTube. Remember to give me an upvote if you're watching this on FreeSpeak, or if you're accessing it through Steam or Steemit or any of these other platforms. Again, thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned, more videos to come.